Divorcees. What's the craziest thing you or your former spouse did after divorce? Story 1. My ex has done a metric ton of weird stuff. Thankfully, most of it not aimed at me. While we were separated and working on our divorce, he would whine to me about relationship issues. With my cousin, with whom he'd had an affair and for whom he'd left me. Mind you, he moved in with not just her, but her common-law husband, and then was upset by how many other boyfriends she had. This is my cousin, who has more baby daddies than she has babies. 2 of her offspring are simultaneously half-brothers and cousins. She's never been known for her monogamy, in other words. But he claimed to have been in love with her since they were children, and this was magically supposed to make her return his affections. Among the best witnessed from a distance bits of this nonsense were him getting jealous of her visiting her husband and running her off the road in his work van, and generally hanging around smashing her instead of taking jobs, to the extent that there were trainees making more money than he was after he'd been there more than a year, and he was eventually invited to resign or be fired. Then there was the time he was doing armed security, and angry at how taking our children on a first date to Austin, he expected to be allowed to stay over at this woman's apartment with his children and her children, and she was rightly horrified at the whole thing, didn't go over well. Had an argument with his girlfriend at the time, not my cousin, but the ex-wife of a different cousin, and drove to her house in his work vehicle to threaten her with a gun. This resulted in a firing, a restraining order, and loss of his right to carry a gun. Then there was the girlfriend who insisted that if he really loved her, he'd move into the homeless shelter with her. So he fabricated being kicked out of his parents' house and spent the requisite month sleeping outside on the shelter's patio before intake, then spent years longer than the relationship living in the shelter, only finally leaving to move in with a woman he'd met a month earlier after ostentatiously asking our children's permission. As you can imagine, they felt they had no choice. Ostentatiously. That's the word I should have said. Ostentatiously. Basically, it's been 13 years of reeling from one relationship to the next, all overlapping, and the kids pulled into them from the very first second. He's currently trying desperately to find another girlfriend to move in with, as the current one is kicking him out to move to Virginia with a new boyfriend of her own. This after some time of subjugating the kids to loud arguments over his corn addiction and their terminated intimate life, and naturally blaming me for the fact that his 2 oldest children both refused to talk to him at all. 2 of my shortcomings as a wife, by the way, were being too classy. He quoted Confederate Railroad to me, and not providing the drama he felt requisite in a relationship. That was a roller coaster to read. It just seems like he is off for passion, and just that last statement just sort of explains everything. If it's not drama and if it's not dangerous, he doesn't seem to be interested. Also, he just seems to keep things close to the family. It's creepy as hell. And living outside a homeless shelter for a girl? No, never. Nope. Story 2. Prior to divorce, he established a pattern of asking me to sleep with someone else. Usually male, female, female threesomes. Usually friends of his/mine/ours. Getting increasingly demanding/moody until I conceded, then reacting with extreme insecurity, jealousy, and possessiveness, and need for reassurance afterwards until it happened again. It destroyed me as well as all of my in-person friendships, and I still don't understand why he needed to go through that psychodrama over and over, or why I didn't leave sooner. To clarify, There's nothing wrong with swinging, polyamory, or ethical non-monogamy, but he really just wanted an on-demand corn service and couldn't take no for an answer, and could not stand the thought of me having feelings for anyone other than him, yet consistently thought I was waiting to cheat on him or abandon him. Shortly before I filed for divorce, he broke into my apartment twice, once because he wasn't done talking, and then because the apartment complex director told him I couldn't legally kick him out of the apartment, intimately assaulted me while I was sleeping, called the cops and DCF because I blocked him on Messenger after close to 24 hours of nonstop texting from him, and chose to publicly throw a couple of punches and an energy drink at the still concussed TBI survivor he'd chosen as my most recent intimate partner, as if any of this was that person's fault. Then he assaulted me in the backyard while refusing to leave and told the police I had attacked him. I filed a restraining order and divorce on the same day. 4 months after our divorce was finalized, and he was granted full custody of our 3 kids for every school vacation, he decided to move halfway across the country to live with his mother. She's still taking care of him. His kids aren't particularly interested in talking to him and haven't seen him in over a year. I offered to pay for him to stay here over the summer so he could see them, but he said nah. This is a fair reflection of his level of engagement with his kids prior to divorce, too. I don't doubt that he loves them, but he rarely chooses to spend time with them because it's stressful. The cops, lawyers, Office of Child Support employees, and the judge have all responded the same way to his endless victim spiel. A tired sigh, a roll of the eyes. He continues to think his situation is everyone else's fault and totally unique. He follows me here and has quoted some of my posts in court. Hi, Brian. ETA. Thanks for the upvotes. Let me know if you've had a similar experience. He's texted me to call me a lying hussy yet again. I've invited him to respond here, or please quit stalking my social media as I've asked, or accept that we have different ideas of how things went. But we'll see. Nope. I know people that are in those kinds of relationships, of swinging, ethical non-monogamy, and all of that. It takes a lot of communication, and it takes a very specific type of temperament to be able to handle that. It's not like on the websites. It's not always going to be like it's going to be on the websites. There's other stuff in real life to work around for all of that. It's a lot more work. There's a lot more people involved. Story 3. While we're still married, she got pregnant with the guy she was cheating on with me, who is also married to someone else. She has the idea that he's going to leave his wife and they're going to get married. She's got a lawyer and filed for divorce. I got a lawyer too. Only thing is that he works for his wife's father, who is setting him up to take over when daddy retires. He realized that getting a divorce means his cushy career is over, confesses everything to his wife, and begs her for forgiveness. His wife takes him back, and he cuts off my wife. Seeing that her dreams of living with her boyfriend are over, she claims that I'm the father, which is impossible because by that time we hadn't had intimacy for more than a year before conception. This does not stop her from telling everyone who will listen that it's my kid. She has her lawyer drop the divorce proceedings. I tell my lawyer to start them with me as the plaintiff and that I want to dispute paternity. I moved out. She starts stalking me, shows up at my job, and tries to get in. I work as a civilian in R&D at a military base. The MPs do not take any of her guff and wind up detaining her when she tries to run past the gate. She calls me at work to bail her out or something. I tell her that whatever she's done, it's not my problem and hang up. I also was able to get a restraining order, which she violated repeatedly. She asked for everything. Both cars, the entire house and contents, savings, my retirement account, etc., plus 7 years of spousal support. I offered no support and half of the assets. If she wanted a house, she'd have to buy me out and refinance in her name only. When the kid was born, she tried to put my name on the birth certificate anyway, but I'd already successfully disputed paternity, so that didn't go over well. She had to go after Loverboy, who was definitely less than happy to see her. In the end, we split the assets 50-50, sold the house, and she got no spousal support. I don't know if she was able to get money for the kid from Lover or not. She called me a few times after the divorce wanting to get together and talk. The calls were in violation of the restraining order, but I never reported it. About 6 months after the divorce were final, I was offered a new job on the other side of the country. I took it and never told anyone outside of my family where I was going. Almost all of our friends believed her when she claimed the baby was mine and made me out to be the jerkwad, so I didn't really feel the need to tell them anything. Life is better now. I'm glad he got an out. I have heard stories of some places where a woman can just put any name they want on a birth certificate. I'd have to look. I'm not sure how true it is. But anybody, even if they were never the father, even if they were never intimate with this person, they're still stuck with child support. And it's kind of awful, but everything she does, she was just trying to do everything she could to secure some kind of financial stability for herself, and she had just ended up losing all the way around, it seems. Nightmare. I'm glad he escaped. Story 4. My ex-husband started dating his stepmom, who has been in his life since he was 11 years old. His stepmom and him are still together almost 5 years later. His stepmom confessed her love of my ex to his dad a few years ago, and they have since divorced. The dad is now dating a 21-year-old. I know all of this because I'm still close with my ex-husband's sister. It's so messed up, and I'm so grateful I left him when I did. Edit. I can't believe this exploded. Here's the highlights. Won't say where it all unfolded because small towns, but they're all from New Jersey. I'm not. The father and my ex-husband don't speak. Basically, everyone in that family, except stepmom obviously, hates my ex-husband and have cut him mostly out of their lives. It may have been a little grooming, but if you met my ex-husband, you'd see he's all around a plotting, manipulative, awful person, so I think it was the other way around. He constantly talked during our marriage about how hot she was. Cornhub, if you're following, I'd happily play the non-nude narrator to a cinematic universe for the right price. Thanks for all the awards, upvotes, and comments. Makes me feel nice to get that off my chest. Don't marry crazy. Story 5. Final straw that led to the divorce. Got drunk and drove her car into the middle of the desert. Sent her friend a picture of the GPS and said I didn't love her, so I wouldn't come and look for her. She wouldn't answer my calls, but kept calling her friend saying I didn't care. I looked for 2 hours before going back home because I needed to work in the morning. She came home and started banging things around and came into our room and threw her phone at me saying I didn't love her, punched me in the face multiple times and went to jail. After I filed for divorce, she lost it. Child Protection Services wouldn't let her stay at the house because of the domestic violence charge against her, so they stayed at her parents'. She purposely stayed at the house so that I couldn't see my kids. I refused to be alone with her for fear that she would hurt herself and blame me, so I always went to the house with someone if I needed anything. She got tired of this and decided to just remove everything from the house while I was at work. I mean, everything that wasn't in my kids' bedrooms she took out of the house. Curtains, ceiling fans, all of the furniture minus the dining table that I don't think she had room for. I thought, well, this sucks, but at least she's gone, so I changed the locks. She broke in and stole the locks the next day while I was at work, left nothing but the holes in the doors to swing open in the wind, took the window locks, cut the power cord to the garage door opener, took the blender that I borrowed from my mom, and popped the air mattress that I borrowed to sleep on. Then she flipped off the main breaker to the house, swore to the judge that someone else must have done it. Story 6. She got custody of our 3 kids, got 70% of my take-home pay for child support, requiring me to move into the barracks. I was in the U.S. Air Force. Then she immediately moved out of state without telling me, despite the divorce decree requiring my consent, all but guaranteeing I would have no contact with my kids. That's not the crazy part. The crazy part is just a few years later, she decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore, so she signed up with a carnival. I think she had the hots for one of the ride operators, and left the girls on there without telling me or the girls beforehand. She called my oldest daughter a few days after leaving to tell her to call me. They hadn't called me before that because they had apparently grown accustomed to their mother disappearing for days at a time. Edit. Some have asked what happened since. This was decades ago. My children are all grown and married with their own children. They all learned after coming to live with me that I wasn't the monster their mother had brainwashed them to believe I was, and they all agreed to be adopted, as adults, by the light of my life, my wife, whom I would never have met if I hadn't been divorced. Only one of my children has any contact with her mother, mainly because my daughter still lives near where she grew up. That's where her husband and his family live, so that's where she'll stay. The best outcome of all my children had the best example in the world of how not to be a mother, and consequently all 5 of my grandchildren are having the best childhoods possible. The kids did not have much of a chance of getting unscathed in this situation, but it sounds like they've grown up to have great families, and I'm just happy that this is the best outcome they could have, especially with their kids, and now the grandkids are having a great life. Just so happy for all of them except the ex. Curse her. Story 7. Continuously texted at all hours threatening self-unaliving. I would rush over to do a welfare check, and he'd open the door with a smile. Hey, since you're here, want to come in for a beer/intimacy? Hard pass. Starting up, I rush over. He's nowhere to be found. I'm calling his parents, friends. Turns out he was just at a bar. Another time, he left a funeral playlist, a note, disappears off the face of the earth for almost a day, reappears so drunk he almost ran into the house. After that, I just couldn't take it anymore. So the next time he started texting, I warned him that I would call the police if he was being serious. But I wasn't coming to check. He went 0 for 10 all quick about how he'd been unalive before they got here, etc. So I called them, and he ended up getting 5150 for the night. Very upset with me the next day, demanding a ride and so on. I hung up, called his mom, said not my mess anymore, here's the address. So then he just found new ways to torture me for a few years, but that one stands out the most. Story 8. We were living in a different state, and she wanted to move back to her home state a year into our marriage. I really had nothing lying me down in that state, so I was down for moving if that's what she really wanted. It had been about 6 months into the move, and she cheated on me with a coworker while I was working full-time and trying to finish up my bachelor's degree. She tells me that she didn't feel the same way about me and that she needed to move out to do some thinking. It's driving me insane trying to think about what could have gone wrong. I had a suspicion about that coworker, but I didn't have any proof. I checked our phone account online, and sure enough, they were talking every night after work while I was out working. I followed her one time, and sure enough, she was going to this guy's house. I confronted her about it, and she finally fessed up. So they continued dating after we finally divorced, and I was able to move on with my life. She ends up getting pregnant by this guy, and he disappears before their baby is even born. Karma definitely came back to bite her after the hell she put me through all alone in a new state with no friends or family around. Story 9. Kidnapped the kids during their weekend visit and moved to a small town in the next state over. It took me 2 years to get them back. Edit. Wow, this got huge. So everyone doesn't have to read all the comments. I did get them back. She eventually burned all her bridges in the town she moved to and went home to her parents' house. Since her parents were not pleased with her choices and were on my side during the whole deal, they called me to let me know where she was. I went and got them. This was over 20 years ago, and they both grown up just fine. I've since remarried, and my second wife has been a wonderful mother to them. It took a lot of work to fix all the damage, but it's mostly okay. The biggest scars that lasted was that my son had a distrust of women with authority that he's worked really hard to get over, and my daughter was afraid to start her own family because she worries she would turn out just like her mom. She finally got over that and is expecting our first grandbaby this fall. And here we have a story where it seems like the kids ended up fine, but this one really shows that there was damage done, but that the man and his new wife really put a lot of work into helping them out, and there was a lot to clean up, but thankfully they did put in the work, and that shows how much they really cared about them. Amazing. It was good to hear that. Story 10. Stalked me for 5 years. Would make fake social media profiles to try to follow me, which I would block endlessly, and would try to find where I worked so she could talk to me. This lady cheated on me with 7 different men 2 months after we were married. I kicked her butt to the curb and made her sign the court papers. When we had our day in court, she cried in the judge's office while I just wanted to get this stuff done. After, my dad was with me, and he threw $50 at her and told her to change your freaking last name. Good guy, Pops. I haven't seen or heard from her in about 5 years, thank goodness.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 11. The divorce was fairly amicable, but he met a woman on the internet and moved her into his apartment a month later. She hated seeing me because I had hurt him, but was also apparently still in love with him. Spoiler, I was emphatically not. She decided that getting my son removed from my custody would solve all her problems, so she called my work and made ridiculously false allegations to my administrator about my conduct with students, but sounded drunk/high and wouldn't leave a name or contact information. Admin pulled her number from the caller ID, and X confirmed that it was that heifer's Oregon phone number. I had to get a temporary protective order for her, so my ex had her move out. Then, she slashed my tires on Mother's Day. He confirmed that one after they broke up. Y'all, he kept dating her for another year even though he knew about everything. My therapist at the time told me that my ex probably found her behavior flattering. Story 12. Kidnapped my 3 boys from my house when I went on my first post-divorce date. Our loved and trusted babysitter was with him. I left dinner ready and kids bathed and already in their jammies. Left for the movie theater when I got a text from my babysitter that she was sorry for not doing the dishes after dinner. So I texted back, "That's okay, I can do dishes later, but you've got a couple of hours as well, the movie hasn't started yet." She was at home as my ex-husband had shown up, lied, and said he was supposed to have the boys that night and that I had said it was okay. I was livid. I knew he was a bit crazy, but I had no idea he was capable of this. I stepped out of the theater, called him, and he said, "If you're going to be dating strangers and endangering the lives of my kids, I will take them." What the hell? So I called the police, they did a report, we went to court, and he was found in contempt for violating our parenting plan. Story 13. Called me and pretended he had been hit by a car while we were talking. He even tried to voice the crowd that had gathered around his body. Awful acting, but pretty funny listening to him try to mimic a woman's voice. Points for trying to be inclusive, I guess. I think he was trying to get me to relive my trauma of being on the phone with a friend who actually had been hit by a car while we were talking. Too bad he didn't realize that hearing the real thing is worlds different than hearing a dummy trying to act it out. Edit. I am so happy I shared this. Y'all making me laugh so much. Story 14. When I told my ex-husband I wanted a divorce, the next day after I went to work, he packed our entire house into a U-Haul and put it in storage. Even with a court order, he refused to give my stuff back. I left my marriage with the clothes on my back. Years later, he decided he was above the courts because he got away with that and took our son across the country, telling me he was moving with 1 day's notice and told me I couldn't do anything about it. Of course, I promptly hired a lawyer and we went back to court and he lost joint custody, but it took a year of fighting, chasing him down, and not seeing my son. There are more stories, but those are probably the worst. Story 15. We divorced because I'm gay. Afterward, she remarried twice. Her second husband, Jack, expired, and she remarried for the third time total, including me, to Randall, who was her worst choice of all. She finally ran him off. We decided to vacation together to New England, Montreal, and Quebec City to check some states off my list of states I had visited. All of them, by the way, except Hawaii. We did the trip like a survey course in that we spent one night in many different towns and cities. For instance, we spent one night in Millinocket, Maine, and we climbed Mount Katahdin the next day. Later, we took an 11-day cruise to Alaska together in 2005. We divorced in 1981. My ex passed away in 2009 of cancer. Of course, there were painful times and heartaches associated with our divorce after 18 years of marriage and the birth of 2 sons, but time can heal a lot of wounds, and former spouses can appreciate the part of the journey they took together, even when they moved on to their next adventure. Story 16. This was from even when I was a kid and my parents were going through a divorce. My dad was a total sociopath. Manipulative, physically and emotionally abusive, illicit substance dealing, the whole 9 yards. Even though my mom was finally able to get out, he still had visitation rights. His family kept on bugging my sister and me, still under 10 years old, to try to convince my mom to talk to him. She finally did try to talk to him when she came to pick us up at the police station from where it was agreed to meet when he had his time with us. They immediately got into an argument. He started throwing one of his temper tantrums, grabbed my mom in front of a cop from the LAPD trying to beat her. Then the cop grabbed him. He let go of my mom with a look of pure terror on his face. I think that was the day I realized he was sociopathic and didn't want anything else to do with him and his crazy old Bible-thumping family. Story 17. My ex stole a car and did 18 months in state prison. Based on what I was able to find online at the time, he approached a car dealership and showed interest in buying a vehicle. This allowed him to take it home for a 24-hour drive. He never returned it. They reported it stolen after they attempted multiple times to contact him to return it. They then contacted the state police, who put a bolo out. They found him driving the vehicle on the other side of the state where he thought he wouldn't be found. I found out when I got an unexpected phone call from the sheriff's office. I asked why they were calling me about this. They said my ex told them I would vouch for him as a character witness. I told the officer over the phone that my ex was a lying sack of trash and shouldn't be trusted. The officer laughed, thanked me for my time, and hung up. Story 18. After he realized I was never going back, he told his mom that I had been stealing from the family the whole time we were together. Then he literally put it in writing that I had a key to his parents' home and would sneak in and take his dad's guns and his grandmother's jewelry, and that he had been powerless to stop me. It was always his addict sister. Always. Anyone with eyes could see it, but no one in the family wanted to believe it. Story 19. Wife cheated on me. When I confronted her, she grabbed a kitchen knife and threatened me. I told her to go ahead. She put it in my chest just deep enough to draw blood and cut down to my belly button. I hit her on top of the head. She fell to the ground. I left, and after signing papers, never saw her again. It's been 24 years now. Thank you for the awards, peeps. I had no idea my idiot marriage at 20 years old would be the topic with the most upvotes. Those 12 months are full of good stories looking back. Story 20. During the divorce, but after separating, my friend's ex tried to claim less assets than he really had, but she was dropping the kids off one day and found retirement fund statements sitting on the kitchen table. Despite claiming that they had been using his income for living expenses and hers was going into savings, somehow he managed to tuck away over $1 million into those two funds, under his name only. When she brought it up with the lawyer, he claimed that he had just forgotten to put those on the list. Story 21. Not me, but my significant other. His wife got married a few days after receiving the court's final decision on the annulment over the marriage case. In our country, we don't have divorce. Well, okay, he's moved on already. Now her new husband plans to have his marriage annulled too. Edit. Hey, this blew up. Yes, we're in the Philippines. So it's hard to get an annulment here. I wish we could have divorce where parties can end their marriage in amicable terms. Story 22. Told everyone I was physically abusive. At the time and now, I am not intimidating in any way. It didn't come out until 2 years later when she needed to change something in our agreement, but couldn't unless I agreed. I made her tell the family that it was something she said when she was mad. Her mom apologized to me for saying things at the time. We're friends now. Have a son together, so it's best. But deity damn, I hated her guts for 5 years. Story 23. She called my company, talked her way up the chain to the president of the company, still don't know how she managed that, but she's smart, and told him I was self-unaliving and had threatened to do something drastic at work. Later, I learned that she thought this would be a roundabout way of getting my address, which I didn't share with her after I moved out because she is bat-scat crazy. Story 24. My ex-husband messages/calls me every November. Our divorce was finalized November 2015. Last time I decided not to answer because I'm in a committed relationship. But every year, like clockwork, our divorce was messy to say the least, and after our final court hearing, we stood outside for like an hour talking about his girlfriend problems. I guess he just needed a friend, but I don't anymore. At least, I don't need him as a friend. Story 25. She would stalk my online account and angrily text me if she didn't like my posts talking about her cheating on me. I came home from seeing my grandmother on her final bed and found she had cheated. She also texted me, accusing me of sabotaging her attempts to get a job that requires a security clearance. Apparently, it was my fault, and not the fact that she had already been denied a security clearance for mental instability. Story 26. After years of telling me she wanted a child, that she wanted to be a mom, that her life's dream was to be a stay-at-home mother, she got pregnant with the first guy she slept with while we were getting divorced and put the kid up for adoption even before it was born. This was a long-standing thing with her. She always wanted something: car, house, dog, cat, marriage, etc. And the second she got it, she immediately hated it. Story 27. Laundry list. But my favorite was his sister sent a Facebook message to all of his contacts the day of our separation, including my family. Before we announced anything, her message stated everyone should immediately delete me, and if I said anything about why we separated, I was lying and not listening. Basically, this created a lot of curious questions and a lot of laughs. Story 28. I was sending $600 a month to support my daughter because she's the only thing I ever gave a care about. My ex texts me and tells me I need to be sending $1,200 a month because she's broke and can't pay her bills, and I should feel guilty about it. She left me for another guy while I was on deployment. I told her to go to hell. She called my lawyer. Story 29. During the whole process of divorcing, she insisted she wanted to be single and hadn't cheated on me. 5 days before we sold our house, she posted on Facebook that she was in a relationship with a guy I had asked about her cheating on me with. A year later, they were engaged. A year after the engagement, they were married. Story 30. Not me, but my grandparents got divorced when my mom was about 17. In their legal battle, they worked out that they would each get 50-50 of the sale of specific shared assets. There was an old junky car and a fairly new RV. My grandpa sold the RV and the car for $1 each. He handed my grandma $1 in court. Story 31. Intimacy. Like right after. We got the divorce, left the courthouse, and decided to have lunch. After lunch, We went back to my house and had spicy time. That was several years ago. Last year, we decided to get back together, and we'll probably end up remarried later this year or next year. Story 32. My ex-wife told me I could leave my stuff in our house while I found somewhere else to stay. I assumed this was a goodwill effort to keep things as amicable as possible between us. When I went to get my stuff, she had burned it all. So that was rough. Story 33. Called me on my birthday 2 years after divorce, offering to make it special, and was quite insistent that I take her up on that opportunity. Was not amused to find out my girlfriend, now wife, had heard the entire conversation on speaker. Story 34. Here's a more wholesome and true one. He had Sunday dinners with my mom for many years after our divorce. He never had a real mom, long story, so I didn't mind sharing mine as long as I didn't have to be there. Story 35. He had his law enforcement officer friends run my new boyfriend. One of their wives told me when I called her to offer my support when I heard she and her husband were getting divorced as well. Story 36. She removed the retaining clips for my windshield wipers, but put the wipers back on the arms. First storm after I got my car back from her, the driver's side wiper flew off the car on Interstate 40. Good times. Story 37. All I wanted was custody of my son. I gave her everything else except one of our cars. She fought me through 5 hearings. I won. She never came to see him again. Story 38. We remained on good terms and still celebrate holidays and birthdays as a family. His 2 youngest kids, with his current wife, call me aunt, and my youngest calls him uncle. Story 39. He basically got everything. House, car, furniture. I just wanted out. 2 years later, he was broke and homeless, wanting to get back together. Sorry, but hell no. Story 40. She wanted the divorce, and after it was done, she cried inconsolably into my chest while I hugged her. Kind of a mind job for me. Story 41. Died of an illicit substance overdose. To be fair, her substance addiction was the reason for the divorce, so maybe that isn't too crazy. Story 42. Took the sodas from the fridge as he walked out the door. Story 43. Remaining friends.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.